Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Today, we want to discuss the developments in Syria and how they affect Armenia in the South Caucasus. Dr. Varuzhan Geghamyan is with us. He is a specialist in Oriental Studies and modern Turkish and Azerbaijani history and politics.
But first of all, thank you to our listeners. In the past few weeks, we have gathered more than 2,000 new subscribers. So welcome to you all, and we hope you enjoy the journey. We will continue to bring you interesting interviews like this and on Armenia's political landscape and more and beyond.
We really appreciate your comments and thoughts on our YouTube videos. We read them, of course, and we think your active participation is making a difference in helping our channel grow and our videos to become more visible on the YouTube platform. So please stay involved, like our shows, and share them with all your friends.
And of course, we'd always welcome your support. Check us out at podcasts.groong.org/donate and use either Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee to support us and become a sustaining member. All right, on with the show.
Welcome, Varuzhan. Good to have you with us.
Thank
you for inviting me and hosting me. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Well, okay, so after 13 or 14 years of brutal war on Syria, the West finally toppled Bashar al-Assad and installed an internationally wanted terrorist and his internationally recognized terrorist organization in control of Syria. How would you summarize what's happened in Syria over the past 2 weeks? And was the current outcome the result of a lot of international backroom deals, or was it a surprise?
Okay, so what happened in Syria have many, let's say, layers, and these layers are connected both with local realities as well as Middle Eastern regional realities. Of course, when we talk about Middle East, it means that it's always about geopolitics, where so many players are engaged, and that's why we should, in a way, understand that we have an intertwined reality. So what happened there can be best summarized, I think, with the following formula. The enemies of Syria and legal government of Syria, finally they reached to their ultimate goal, which was to topple down the national government and start a process which probably can be best described as a competition over creation of their zones of influence in Syria. So there were, of course, several key players in this whole process, and to name just a few of them, it's of course one of the key players, if not the key player, is Turkey, of course, and then Israel and the United States. And these are the winning side, and of course there is another side which lost the fight there and lost their, again, geopolitical goals or
influence.
And at least in this stage, it's of course Iran and Russia. So it has little to do with the let's say local disagreements of local population with the Assad's policy. Of course, there was, disagreement there, as in any other country. There were so many difficulties and there were disagreements. There were groups inside society, large groups, which were against what Bashar was and other representatives of ruling team were doing. But still, it was not about the demonstration. It was not about opposition from the early beginning, but it was rather just a tool for those who were, let's say, playing their cards here just to reach their goals. And one of my colleagues from Syria, where I was just 3 months ago doing a field research. She was in many details describing how everything was started, and it was one of my goals to understand how the process started actually. She was part of the processes. She was part of, by the way, opposition back then. So she said that we were surprised as people who were against the economic policy of the government, and we were taking the streets. But then at like fourth or fifth day, we were surprised because we have seen a lot of people with guns and with rifles, and so it was surprising. And who are them? I mean, we are not, we don't have a goal to topple down somebody with guns, etc. So I mean, it was clearly a prepared thing, and there are so many evidences about this. But of course, the media, and particularly Western media in this case, is presenting the process as something that is driven by the real desire of the people, their let's say democratic aims and goals. Yeah.
And the sheer language of the media is also exactly like that. Instead of these people who are actually recognized even by the United States as terrorists, they've suddenly become freedom-loving rebels against the government.
Varuzhan, while the history of this still needs to be written and there are a lot of unknowns, reports are trickling out that both Iranian and Russian intelligence knew of this plan, perhaps maybe not soon enough to counteract it in an effective way, but they knew of this plan, and essentially Assad and the Syrian military decided not to fight. And let me just also add that Hakan Fidan today gave a statement where he said that Turkey convinced Russia and Iran not to provide support to Assad.
Yeah, there should be, I mean, more, let's say, comprehensive understanding of what happened during these months, but at least what we know for sure during this period. Okay, so let us put the known unknowns, and then we'll talk about unknown unknowns. First of all, what I have seen, this is first of all my perception on the ground. As I said, I spent there at least 20 days, and I talked with many people from the political and military elite of Syria. So probably on the third or fourth day of my research there, what I have written in my diary, it was that okay, unfortunately, the elite is not prepared for another turn of the war, so another stage of the war. And this was very clear for me, not because they were, I mean, I don't know. They didn't like Syria anymore. They are not patriotic or they are treacherous. No, it was because the country was really devastated, and the resources were on the edge, and people were really in a way unprepared for another stage of the war, because it should be really understood here, right now, that we are not talking about just 2 weeks as currently it is being presented. We are talking about 13 years of constant fight and of full blockade and sanctions and really unprecedented pressure on a country which is not even like Russia, I mean, in its scales. But it was not, of course, it was not a poor country, but still with very limited resources. And imagine that you are in a constant war with so many enemies inside and on your front, inside the country and on the front lines, so that you have to constantly fight. And my understanding of the situation was that elite and the people, they are too tired for another stage, and that's why sometimes when I mean, interviewing them, people were saying that okay, probably the war now is just a history, and now we are in the process of diplomatic war or diplomatic, let's say, negotiations, and that's it. So that's why both the, let's say, infrastructure of the country as well as the people, those who were decision makers, I think that they were in a way not prepared for this. Again, not because they were, again, let's say, not for Syria or they were treacherous. Okay, so this is the first thing. Second thing I should mention here is that, of course, the timing of the attack, these 2 weeks happened in perfect timing. I mean, those who planned these, they calculated the possibility of support to Assad from his two main allies, Iran and Russia. And this should be, I mean, very clearly said that this is an objective thing. I mean, it's not because, for example, one dislike or like Iran or Russia, but because two countries had so many difficulties and limitations in other places that it was in a way, with the limited resources they had on the ground, it was not possible to reach the level of protection of Syrian territory that they used to do back in the middle of 2010s, when they supported Assad and they managed to keep the country safe and liberate so many territories, including, by the way, Aleppo and the Aleppo district, by the way. So this was the second thing, and I mean, this is probably one of the two, three key factors of this the current situation. Third thing, which should be again mentioned, what we know for sure is that there were attempts by both Russia and some other players, regional players, to convince Bashar Assad to go for negotiations with Turkey. Here we should be very precise in describing what happened, because there are so many rumors that Russia was again, I mean, putting its ally into a difficult situation. No, it's not about that. Here we should understand that going to negotiations with Turkey was not a best case scenario. It was probably one of the worst options, which can not stop the possible attack, but probably somehow postpone it to another stage. Because what we know again for sure is that for at least 4 years, Turkey and its allies, they were preparing the troops for this attack. So we know this for sure. And from here we can go to a logical conclusion that no real negotiations and no real peace talks were planned, but rather just in a way, a maneuver which should put Assad's attention to other things and not give him a possibility, or by the way, believe that this is the end of the war, okay, and not be prepared for the possible large-scale attack, which happened. And by the way, those forces which attacked the Syrian positions, they were very well prepared, even compared to the period of the first stage of the war. So, I mean, imagine that this is not a work of one day or 1 week or even a couple of months. This is a work which was done year by year, gradually preparing, collecting, analyzing, and putting everything into this whole mechanism of preparation. So yeah, this was not one day action, but this was not connected only with Assad and the Syrian local realities, but it was also about the international situation. And I'm pretty sure that there were several calculations done by Iran and Russia, and they came to very not satisfactory from the philosophical side, from the, let's say, moral side maybe, but very rational calculation and rational decision to not to go into new fight, because given their limited resources, it was not enough to stop the fighters, and their resources were not enough, not because only of their presence on the ground, but also because of the infrastructure. The situation with the infrastructure and the moral situation on Assad's side. So I think that this is in a way very rational and very predictable.
Varuzhan, you mentioned that Turkey is, of course, the key player in all this.
Sure.
And you mentioned how much logistical support they gave to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, SNA, Syrian National Army, and their allies. But ultimately, what is their goal? What were they trying to negotiate with Bashar al-Assad that Bashar al-Assad was not wanting to discuss?
Yeah. So, Turkey is definitely the key player, and we have so many signs of this, but I would like to bring the one that I probably admired most. The first visit by any foreign statesman to Syria after what happened was the visit by Ibrahim Kalin, the head of the Turkish National Intelligence Service, and the way that he was being greeted by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and all other demonstrants is quite symbolic, because the leader of this terrorist group even personally drove him in the streets of Syria. In a way, this is the showing who is the owner of the process, who is the one who facilitates the process. And of course, Turkey is the first country to right now open its embassy again in Damascus, and many other, I mean, many other sites. So this is, I mean, very, very clear that we are dealing with, first of all, Turkish-led operation. I mean, I'm not saying that Turkey is the only country, but I'm saying that Turkey is the conductor of this. Okay, the main operator and the main or spin doctor and everything of this process. So this is for sure. Second thing, of course, there were other countries like first of the United States and Israel, which have the same goal, but with other motivations. So probably we'll talk about this. Okay. So what is Turkey's motivation behind of this process? Well, here we have several things to mention, and let's start with the very basic one. Syria was, because I don't think that Syria is going to be the same after this, and even I'm not sure that we are going to have Syria as a country separately. So probably some other states will be formed on this territory. So Syria was a neighboring country, and naturally Turkey, as any other country, and especially a country with this type of ambitions, it has some concerns in Syria and very, very deliberate interest in Syria, because it's about national security, it's about communications, it's about possibility of neighbor to influence Turkey. So it's better to have influence on Syria to stop possible, let's say, interactions of Syrian side into Turkish territory. So but that's why very basically from the very beginning of its history, I mean Turkish Republic from 1920s, Turkey was very active in looking and considering Syria as a priority in its foreign policy. Given the fact that Syria was a very strong neighbor, by the way, especially in the second half of 20th century, Turkey also was looking at Syria with some concerns because, for example, there was a territorial, not a dispute, but actually Turkey annexed one part of northwestern Syria, the governorate of Alexandret, which is known as Hatay right now, where, by the way, the Armenian Musa Dagh, the Musa mountain, is located. It was annexed by Turkey in 1939, so the countries have even, or like, let's say, official reason to be in conflict with each other, and Syria never recognized this as part of Turkey. So, I mean, there were so many problems. Second thing, which again is very natural, Turkey is considering Syria as one of the backyards of Kurdish partisan fight and partisan struggle, namely the PKK, Kurdistan Workers' Party, struggle inside Turkey, and because of the possibility to cross the border and to transfer also some, let's say, armaments, people, etc. Syria was always considered as one of the main camps for the Kurdish resistance. And that's why, by the way, they call it as a place of the birth of Kurdish terrorism, as they call it. Having control over these territories, over the north of Syria, especially northeast of Syria, was very important for Turkey to cut the connection between two different parts of Kurdish resistance. So with that, it first of all secures its domestic, let's say, security, provides domestic security, or lessen the possibilities and tools for resistance for Kurds in Turkey, as well as it is in a way creating let's say, a very big gap between two bigger parts of Kurdish nation. So this was very important also in midterm and long-term perspective, because with that it also lessened the possibility or limit the possibility for Kurdish revival and or creation of Kurdish autonomy, and then possibly a Kurdish state. So this was very important for Turkey to have control over the north of Syria. And with that, Turkey, in the recent years, given the possibility to go inside the Syrian territory with its forces, with its own armed forces, they actually occupied part of northern Syria, and they still want to occupy the whole border, almost 1,000 kilometers, and to create the thing that they call a buffer zone, which should have 30 kilometers width, and so 1,000 kilometers and 30 kilometers deep inside Syrian territory, and they call this buffer zone, which is actually just a better name for occupation of northern Syria.
And mostly Kurdish populated.
Yeah, mostly Kurdish populated. And by the way, what they say is that we are for Syrian territorial integrity, but in fact, they say at the same time, at the same sentence, in the same paragraph, they say, okay, guys, we are for Syrian territorial integrity, but we, for our own concern, we should create a buffer zone, a security zone in the north of Syria. So this was what actually they were doing, and now they plan to continue that because until 2024, they managed to have almost half of this northern part. Now they plan to do in the northeastern part, again, heavily Kurdish populated. And what they do in these territories, and here comes the next and the last part here, they actually try to make these territories to be territories for future quasi-states or satellite states for Turkey, because they do what we call in science demographic engineering there. They conduct social engineering there by changing the demographics, bringing Sunnites and loyal Turkoman tribes to these territories to live, and taking out Kurds and non-loyal Arabs, etc. So second thing which we do here is the full integration of the institutions which work here in these territories into the Turkish state institution system. So I mean, from banking to education, from religious institutions to military, all is integrated with neighboring Turkish states.
Are those people using the Turkish lira as their
Absolutely.
denomination?
They use Turkish lira, the educational system in schools and in universities. The full are incorporated in Turkish educational system. I mean, the Turkish is one of the main languages right now there. So it's a preparation for another, if I may compare, it's a preparation for another northern Cyprus.
You mentioned Northeast Syria and the Kurdish population there, but we know that the U.S. currently has a base there and is supporting the Kurdish population, and through them, coincidentally or consequently, expropriating a majority of Syria's oil reserves. There's a Conoco, I believe, oil field there.
And can I add one thing here? 50% of Syria's revenues came from approximately, I think, 380,000 barrels per day that Syria could produce, and all of this is getting expropriated by the U.S. and sold to basically Turkey through the Kurds, and that's why Syria could not even support its own economy.
So to continue, now that the Syrian National Army is going on an offensive there, and ultimately we see that this potentially could pit Turkish and U.S. forces against each other through their proxies, at least. How will the Turkish and U.S. interests be settled on the border, especially in the northeast section of Syria?
Yeah, that's correct. That there, as I said, there was one goal to topple down Assad, but with different motivations. So here we are in the stage of different motivations, and as I already said, the timing was also very perfect. And that's why Turkey is using this transition period when we have the government of the United States in the process of transferring power from Biden administration to President-elect Trump. The Turkey is using this gap, the time gap, to do whatever it can do so that when Trump's administration really takes the power, they have better negotiating positions. And whatever is going to be the decision of the United States, and we know that at least from the experience of first Trump term, that Trump, he himself personally wants to take out American forces from Syria. And he tried several times during the first term, but the, let's say, deep state said, okay, it's not the best thing to do for US at this moment. So maybe we are going to witness another attempt by Trump to change the situation on the ground and take out US troops. In that case, Turkey right now has much better, let's say, options to suggest to United States as its ally, saying that, you know, if you are going out, there is going to be a vacuum of power. So you want Iran to fill in this vacuum, this gap? No, you don't. You want Russians to take there? No, you don't. So I am possibly the best option out of the worst options. And you see that they, with the advantage of the Turkish forces in different parts, now they can, I mean, make this happen very quickly. In case US says that I'm going to stay here, again, Turkey has better negotiating position, saying, okay, we have some security concerns, and because of some security concerns, you should not be against our, let's say, latest operations we did in Manbij, for example, or in other places. So, I mean, in other words, it's a win-win situation for Turkey. And that's why, as I said, it's perfect timing. Until January, we'll definitely, I'm more than sure, please remember this, Turkey is going to launch a large-scale military attack east of Euphrates. And it will try to get wherever it is possible in this, in a way, short time period.
When you say it will be a large-scale offensive, will it be doing it with Turkish forces, basically Turkey's army, or through its proxies like HTS?
No, proxies definitely are going to be part of this operation, but I'm more than sure that the Turkish armed forces are going to be part as well. So at least we have we have from open source intelligence, we have proofs that Turkish armed forces are already dislocated in the positions that are important for starting a large-scale offensive. So that's why, yeah, I'm sure that the armed forces officially will be part of this. And just going back to the last question, the last part I didn't mention, but it's important for people to understand. It's not only about Kurds; it's also about Turkish control over the most important parts of Syria from the economic perspective, because as you said, it's oil rich, but besides oil, it's the place where one of the other pillars of Syrian economy, the grain agriculture, was located. So now currently Turkey has control over it. And besides that, the last thing is that again, north is from the perspective of geography. It's not only the most prosperous part of Syria, but also it gives control because of its location and its terrain. It gives control over the rest of Syria, over the Syrian desert and let's say more plain territories. And that's why control over there means that Turkey in reality, in fact, controls the whole, let's say, the whole Syria. And it gives Turkey much more possibilities in all, let's say, in the whole Middle Eastern geopolitics. And that's why Turkey is very rational in that. It's not about, as people try to show, some experts and some others try to describe this as, Erdogan's crazy dream of neo-Ottomanism. No, it's not about that. Of course, there is also Ottoman nostalgia, but as it used to be before and nowadays, it is about, first of all, very rational steps to make Turkey a regional superpower. So that's why we should understand that it's not only about Erdogan, but rather it's all about Turkish very realpolitik conscience and very rational calculations, which Erdogan just, let's say, he is crazy enough to do that. Not because he's crazy with the idea, but he is prepared enough to do that, and the resources are enough to conduct that policy.
Yeah, Varuzhan, Some analysts, such as economist Timothy Ash, argue that the balance in power in the region is now tilted heavily in Turkey's favor, especially vis-à-vis Russia. And Russia will be forced to barter with Turkey in order to keep its bases in Syria because despite what some Russian analysts, I would say, they're coping with this, oh, those bases are not that important. I think that, I mean, well, at least my subjective opinion is that they need those bases, or at least Timothy Ash believes so. And he says that Russians will be forced to barter with Turkey. Do you agree with this narrative first? And if so, what could Turkey demand from Russia in exchange for rights to house those bases?
Definitely, Syria was an important asset for both Iran and Russia. I mean, there is no doubt on this. Okay, so and there is no doubt in Iran and in Russia as well. We are not talking about propaganda stuff, but we are talking about the real decision making on both sides. And I have a possibility to share my experience with working both in Russia and Iran, and with my colleagues there. I mean, when we are discussing the regional issues, I mean, I have never seen anybody who says that, that are not important. No, they are really important assets, as I said, both for Iran and definitely for Russia, for Russian ambitions in Eastern Mediterranean, for Russian ambitions in Middle East, for Russian ambitions, by the way, in Africa, where Russia currently has so many assets. The Syria and Syrian bases were the internal, let's say, logistical
Hub,
importance.
sort of.
Both,
Yeah.
yeah, it was hard because Russia is too far from Africa, so it in a way used Syria to transfer people, money, logistics, armaments, everything, weaponry to Africa. So I mean, Syria was not just about Syria or even Middle East, but with all this Middle Eastern direction, or even African direction in Russian foreign policy, was not definitely more important than Ukrainian and European in general, European issues, because Russia, first of all, it's not a Middle Eastern country. It's not a Middle Eastern power. It, first of all, is a European power. And for Russian decision making, of course, Ukraine and all other things which are connected with this direction are definitely number one priority. And given the fact that Russia, as any other country, has so many limitations, and given the fact that now they are entering into probably the most difficult from diplomatic perspective, by the way, stage of Ukrainian war, the Middle Eastern politics in a way was overshadowed. And that's why I think it was very, again, rational from the Russian perspective to concentrate all the possible best resources on Ukrainian direction. It doesn't mean that Russia will not try to, I don't know, keep the bases, for example. It doesn't mean that it will close the Middle Eastern, let's say, folder and put it aside. No. But one thing we know for sure is that currently it has no resources to work the way it used to work in the mid of 2010s. I think that this is the real driver behind Russia's motivation. We can't say that this is the same with Iranian, let's say, side. This is a separate conversation, but at least on the Russian side, we have seen this calculation. And don't mask these with the propaganda stuff which are currently being done, because of course there should be some, let's say, part of face saving, because at least for the domestic population, and why not for international community as well, because Russia is an international player. So you have to show that this was not a lose, but rather it was a very
4D chess.
etc.
Yes.
Yeah, it was about, let's say, more, let's say, strategic step to
It was a
go.
trap. It was a trap for for the West.
It is being presented, but I mean, in reality, nobody in let's say Kremlin or in other real, let's say, places where the decision making is being done. I'm more than sure that no real conversation about the victory or something. No, it's a lose. Definitely, it's a lose. But I mean, it's a lose because of some more important things to do and to conduct. By the way, if I may just add one thing again, probably my second prediction is that in this interview is that I'm more than sure that Russians are not going to keep the bases there. I'm not because they don't want, but because Turkey is not going to give
Maybe
them.
the price will be too high.
It will be definitely too high. And by the way, if they even keep for a while, they are going to be dependent much more on Turkey than they probably would like to, because it's very difficult to support the bases there without, let's say, without Iranian presence, and they are going to be much more dependent on Turkey. So the price is going to be very high.
Yeah, there was a quick news item that said basically Russia has reached an agreement with HTS to keep the naval base in Tartus, and the first thought we had was basically how long is that going to last?
Yeah, by the way, yesterday there were again the OSINT, open source intelligence, showed that Russia
Evacuating.
is preparing to leave the Khmeimim airport. So I
Right.
mean, I'm more than sure that this is
Yeah.
going to be happening just like after.
So some analysts we've talked to think that Turkey and Israel currently being embroiled and partitioning and controlling Syria.
Sure.
With that happening, Turkey may have bitten too much to chew, and it may not have the bandwidth to pursue other Pan-Turanic goals, such as the project that goes through Armenia that is called by the Turks Zangezur Corridor.
Yeah.
But throughout the regime change operation in Syria, there have been high-level talks between Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Israel. Aliyev congratulated Erdogan and the Syrians for liberating their territory. Fidan Bayramov, Hajiev was in Tel Aviv, Zakir Hasanov was in Ankara, and Azerbaijan has recently raised its animus against the EU mission in Armenia, increased its demands on Armenia, including sort of forcing some kind of a discussion between the Western Azerbaijan community and the government of Armenia. And generally, talks seem to be going in a downward direction, if not stalled. So how is the Syria situation going to affect the situation in the South Caucasus, especially in terms of Armenia and Azerbaijan?
Well, basically, though the South Caucasian and Syrian tracks are different tracks, but still, of course, they are intertwined. And if we are talking about not just, Armenian-Turkish relations or Armenian-Turkish conflict, but rather we are talking about Turkish regional politics, then probably, of course, the Syrian folder, the Syrian case is influencing a lot Turkish possibilities and resources. So what we can say at this moment is that Turkey appears to be the winning side in this game, and Turkey definitely now has much more leverage on Russia and Iran. At least in one part of Middle East, which means that they have much more leverage in other parts as well. And in South Caucasus particularly, where we have the same, let's say, the same game and the same players. So one thing is for sure that Turkey now will have absolutely another stand in talks with Iran and Russia over South Caucasus. And as we have seen in Qatar, in Doha, just a day before the collapse of legitimate Assad regime, it was not about three countries discussing the future of Syria, but rather it was a talk separately between Turkey and Iran and Turkey and Russia. And actually, two sides were discussing what is going to be the future of their presence in already Turkish-led Syria. So maybe Turkey will try to do something in South Caucasus. But of course, the conditions and possibilities and tools for Turkey in South Caucasus are different compared to Syrian case, because in Syria, as we already discussed, Turkey has not only proxies, but also it has its own military presence. In South Caucasus, the territory is smaller, There are no official proxies of Turkey, at least military proxies. And at the same time, Turkish military presence is very limited. So, though it exists, but it's very limited. And here we come to a situation when also now the very geography is going to be important. What I mean, Syria was too far from Russia. Syria is even far from Iran, though much closer compared to Russia. Though it is still, I mean, far from their very borders. South Caucasus is just on the border of Russia. It's just on the border of Iran. So I think that especially after Syria, there is going to be much more attention towards South Caucasus. At least this is my wishful thinking, but still, I mean, this is going to be possibly the real rational step that two sides can take. And that's why I think that for Turkey it is going to be much more difficult in case it plans to do something like it did in Syria. But of course, here the game also has some other players like Georgia, which is not, let's say, a passive player in the game. It's a change maker in any sense. That's why we have seen so much attention and focus on Georgia recently. And in your podcast also covered this a lot, and I followed it. Yeah, I followed it, and for example, Archie very deliberately discussed and presented the real picture there. So I mean, this is a much more complex game, but here, of course, also, I mean, we should say that Turkey's ambitions, they are, let's say, not less than it had in Syria. So I think that for a while, Turkey is going to be busy with Syria until the end of January, being prepared for discussions, talks, etc. And next year is going probably to be about South Caucasus. So South Caucasus can be the let's say real playground of the new geopolitical competition. And many things also, here comes the last, let's say, the last factor. Many things are going to be connected not only with the possible finish of Ukrainian war, which can happen somewhere between the beginning and the end of spring. There are so many rumors and conversations, discussions about the possibility to finish the war by May 9. So maybe this is going to happen. But also, besides that, many things are connected with the possible U.S. pressure on Iran.
Of course, our incoming president has said that it's going to be over by the end of basically January 21st, right? Because he was Trump has promised that he will fix this problem in one day. Just a quick question here. As you mentioned, Iran has also suffered some heavy setback with this Middle East strategy going south.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. How likely is it that this is going to affect its red lines about Armenia's territorial integrity?
And to add to that, a lot of analysts are now saying that the only choice that Iran has is to start development of or develop nuclear weapons. But essentially, that seems to be the last line of defense. So if the focus is that Iran has no other choice but to develop nuclear weapons, the South Caucasus also playing that logic, in that if Turkey and Azerbaijan do a like blitzkrieg operation and capture Zangezur, it really unless it has nuclear weapons to go against all of them, then it will be sort of against the tide.
Well, again, here we are entering into the field of political speculation, and I don't want to do that because we have so many unknowns right now. But again, what we can say for sure, right, at this moment, I mean, at the moment of the recording of this interview, it can change at any moment. That we should be very clear here with our audience. We know that there is no change in red lines. Red lines of Iran towards Sunni, towards Armenia's borders. Second thing we know, at least for this moment, it's that there is no dislocation of Iranian troops from the bordering region of Syunik, which was I mean, they were located there since 2021 as a
Deterrent.
demonstration
Yeah.
of the deterrence and the demonstration of the will of Iran to in case to be part of the game. Okay. So at least at this moment, we don't have any information, any open source that doesn't show that. Third thing is that most probably the losses in Palestine, the losses with Hezbollah, the losses in Syria would probably make Iranian political elite to be very attentive towards northern borders, because now, I mean, I think that nobody has a doubt that the pressure on Iran is going to rise, and one of the sides of this pressure is the northern border.
Hmm.
I think that at least in Iranian side, I recently have been there and talked with Iranian colleagues, and my perception is that there is a clear understanding of this, so that the South Caucasus is not just the backyard of geopolitics, but now it becomes the main stage of geopolitics. So hopefully there is going to be decision making based on these perception rather than let's say the perception of previous stages. But of course, and here I should give the floor to a specialist on Iranian studies. But what I have, I mean, what I have read and what I have analyzed myself is that there are so many problems in Iran as well.
You mean domestically, internally?
Yeah, of course. I mean, but I'm not talking about economy, etc. I mean,
Mm.
this is not the thing that I'm interested in, but I'm talking about the difficulties in my perception. This is
Hmm.
not a perception of a specialist, but I think that there are, so let's say, there are some discussions within Iranian elite about the future of Iran, and I don't like the style of the discussions, because they have some similarities what I have heard in 3 months ago in Damascus or in Aleppo, and probably you understand what I mean.
Of course.
So hopefully this is not going to be the case, and Iranian elite will be much more, let's say, prepared for any possible development. Of course, we are discussing, as you probably have noticed, we are discussing all the external players, and we are not discussing Armenia, which can be a change maker in case it has absolutely other type of foreign policy and geopolitical understanding of the issues, and it can really change the cards of everybody here playing here. But as far as it's not part of the game, it's just the field of the game and the subject of the game. We have this picture.
We'll make a note to ourselves so that we pursue that Iranian line that you mentioned. You also mentioned that Ukraine war is starting to show some signs of abating, and probably in the first few months of 2025, we might see something. So how would a slowdown, a stoppage, or even a full-on peace agreement between in Ukraine, let's say, lead to Russia to pivot either in Syria, the Middle East, Armenia, South Caucasus? What can we expect once Russia is not completely consumed by Ukraine?
Well, if we have something happening in Ukraine in terms of peace or long-term peace, even in the form of ceasefire, by the way, this is also going to be a peace. We first of all have decrease in the tension between, in general, West and Russia, which means that the importance of South Caucasus for Western camp is going to be lesser than it has right now. Which means that not all the endeavors and initiatives by Turkey's side in South Caucasus will have at least silent agreement and green light from West. So this is the, let's say, more general frame. Next thing that we have, of course, probably discussed many times, even here on this platform, is that Russia is going to be less concentrated in Ukraine and have possibility to concentrate on other issues. Because what I have seen in many times during my visits to Russia and many times during my discussions with my Russian colleagues, guys, for you to imagine, it's all about Ukraine, Ukraine, and Ukraine. So imagine a person who doesn't have anything to think about except for only one matter in his life. So you don't even you can talk, you can discuss some issues, but what you really think, even at that moment when you discuss something, it's about other things. Okay? In this case, it's about Ukraine and all the resources, intellectual resources, military resources, finances, diplomatic resources, everything is concentrated in Ukraine.
Right.
And the situation is going to be different in case there is a ceasefire there and there are, let's say, less tensions and less reasons to think about the very, let's say, very important issues like going to take the other city and the other village or keep the front line in Kursk region, etc. So it's definitely going to change and many things. And of course, here comes the phase when probably the again Armenian side should be very active, or Iranian side should be very active, because when you have now, let's say, ceasefire and you have a possibility to concentrate on other issues as well, then the other side should work to make Russian side to be concentrated on specific issues which are of mutual interest. So that's why Azerbaijan is very active in Russia. Turkey is very active in Russia because they know that now Russia could have more possibilities. And to lessen the penetration of Russia in South Caucasus, they should work, they should lobby, they should pursue Russian representatives of Russian elite to work more, let's say, with understanding of Turkish interest in South Caucasus. So this is basically going to be the game. And of course, there is going to be a window of opportunity, in other words, but it also means that those who are going to be active and those who are going to demonstrate some initiatives, they are going to use this window, not those who are passive and sitting and just, let's say, waiting that someday a savior will come.
But Varuzhan, you're a historian. Is it true that the small countries, for example, Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, do better when the big three countries around them compete with each other, not necessarily war, but just basically compete for influence rather than they are at peace with each other?
Well, I don't really remember any period when these three are not competing in South Caucasus and they're in peace. Because the peace is just, by the way, the let's say non-active phase of competition, but still it's active. I mean, still there is a competition. We can speak about, if we look at the history of the region that we nowadays call South Caucasus. Back it was just an Armenian highland, like before 19th century. If we look at the what we call in historical science the method of longue durée, which is the long period,
The long term, yeah.
long-term approach. When we look at South Caucasus, what we see is just it's always about conflicts, but just with two differences: the periods of active conflict and the periods of cold conflicts or Cold War. So, I mean, right now we are in the phase of probably of real and active conflict, but it doesn't mean that there is going to be a period when there is no conflict. No, of course it's not.
Varuzhan, of course, we discussed that Turkey's actions have been regarded negatively by both Russia and Iran. Alexander Dugin was shitposting on Twitter, and he was saying that Turkey has backstabbed Russia and they will never forget it. But we also talked about the fact that they eventually had to have some kind of a diplomatic agreement, both Iran and Russia, at least if we were to believe Hakan Fidan, who said that they were able to dissuade Russia from helping Assad. But I wanted to actually talk about the Russian and Iranian relations, which are pretty important for Armenia. What does this portend for the Russia-Iran strategic agreement that is reported to be in the works? First, we had heard reports that it was going to be signed during the BRICS summit a month ago, and now I think it's slated for January. But do you think that the delay of this agreement has anything to do with the geopolitical developments that we're seeing?
To be honest, I don't know much about this. I don't have insights into this, but I know what I know is that there is intensive diplomatic work on both sides. And I don't know in which phase they are right now, but there is constant work in two capitals on this. Of course, there are so many. mm, difficulties, let me put this word, difficulties between these sides because first of all they don't really know each other, and this is very clear. Sometimes my Iranian colleagues, they when we meet and we talk, they sometimes like very, let's say, frankly and very openly, they say, help us understand Russians. And this is usually the talk that I have. Last time I was in Tehran a couple of weeks ago, and a very senior diplomat, Iranian diplomat, after the discussion, he said, like, you have lived in Russia. Just explain me how to understand them. So I mean, this is a problem in reality because this country has never worked in this last, let's say, 30, 40 years the way that is really enough to right now create a cooperation and alliance in this difficult reality. So that's why I think that this is one of the most important problems the sides have. And by the way, here, if we turn off the jokes, Armenia can be possibly the best bridge between two sides. By the way, right? And it can use this as a diplomatic tool, but of course in more better conditions. Well, if we come to the main point, it's that I know, as far as I know, there are last preparations for an agreement on the economic in the economic bloc, and unfortunately for us, it's the Russian side is putting Azerbaijan into this calculation as well, saying that okay, this is a with the rationale behind that, including Azerbaijan into this line will make Azerbaijan be under Russian influence rather than be under Turkish influence. So in their understanding, this is the best way to do that. As far as I can judge from my conversations, at least, Iran is not okay with this idea. Because they know the very essence of the Azerbaijani state, and they clearly understand that nothing will stop Azerbaijan to be a Turkish state and the best ally of Turkey. So they have a lot of concerns over this, and this is the reason why the so-called North-South corridor through the territory of Azerbaijan is still in the process of long-term preparations.
As far as this broken trust, let's call it, between Turkey, Russia, and Iran, they're the big three of the 3+3 platform, and there was a little bit of work being done in the 3+3 as far as the Armenian-Azerbaijani talks go. Is this going to degrade the platform, make it less useful, more? How is it going to affect that angle?
Well, Asbed, let me disagree with you on this because 3+3 platform is not doing any work. It's just, it's just imagine a club where you go in the evening and sitting and just smoking and discussing some issues without any intention to really deal with anybody who is sitting and just smoking a cigar with you. It's just, it's a club of conversation. By the way, too far from its initial idea proposed by Turkey, because the platform was initially, let me remind that it was a proposal of Turkey to create something where it can be the dominant force in South Caucasus, or get a, let's say, validation of its ambitions in South Caucasus. But whenever it saw that there is a cooperation between Iran and Russia against Turkish ambitions in South Caucasus, it became, let's say, less active in this platform. And now those who are really like pulling forward this idea are Russia and Iran, which were initially against this platform. And that's why we have, let's say, turn in the change in the roles of this. So that's why there is no real active work. Everybody understands that this is just, a matter of time. And as you can even judge by the meetings of the sides. It happens twice in a year in best case scenario, and now no real mechanisms are developed there. There is no even organizational anybody which works on this. I mean, there is no a secretariat of 3+3 platform, or there is no responsible person for putting the issues on the table. So I mean, I don't see any real work there, and I don't see them predict them in the future as well.
In fact, it's a 3+2, really, not a 3+3.
Yeah, first of all, it's 3+2, and then
Even the
I
math
mean,
doesn't add up quite.
yeah, it's just a way to meet and discuss the things that are already being discussed in other tracks on other platforms, and so I don't think there is really need to concentrate much on this platform, at least in this stage.
All right, let's leave it there for today. On that note, thank you so much, Dr. Geghamyan, for your time and insight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's our show today. This episode was recorded on December 13, 2024. We have been talking with Professor Varuzhan Geghamyan, who is an assistant professor at Yerevan State University's Department of Oriental Studies. He teaches courses on Turkey's modern history, the history of Azerbaijan, sociocultural anthropology of Azerbaijan, political ideologies and parties in modern Turkey, and history of the Turkish Republic, and more. For more information on the participants of this episode, Professor Geghamyan, myself, Hovik, check out our show notes on podcasts.groong.org/episode number. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And I'm Hovik Manucharyan. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our show on various platforms, including YouTube. You can find us on social media everywhere and any platform that you use to listen to podcasts.
Thanks for listening.
We'll talk to you soon.